So here we are at the AMC 12 in Muncie, Indiana. We're going to go in here this weekend. Of course, this is Kdog's movies for the weekend, my weekend movies. So tonight we're going to take a look at the film Saturday Night. And supposedly, well, not supposedly, but this is the film biopic telling about how Saturday Night Live started up, and which is still going. Sometimes I wish they would stop, but so be it. But yeah, we're gonna go in here, just check the film out, and I'll let you know what I think of it. Okay, well, I'm back here at the house, and of course, last night went to see Saturday Night. And what this film is, it's the 90 minutes telling the true story of the 90 minutes that led up to being one of the most iconic moments in television history, as well as one of the longest running shows of all time, Saturday Night Live. Everything that led up to the premiere episode of Saturday Night Live. The film is exactly, well, not exactly 90 minutes, but it's actually a little bit 10 minutes over. It's about 100 minutes. Actually, yeah, 1 hour and 49 minutes. So actually about 20 minutes over, but it's the the film depicts it starting at 10 o'clock, all the dress rehearsal and all the chaos that was going on that led to one of the longest running TV shows ever, being Saturday Night Live. And of course, I don't know how accurate exactly went on, but of course, I've watched SNL over the years, and I've watched all the different casts, from key people like Will Ferrell and Mike Myers, Dana Carvey, Maya Rudolph. Molly Shannon and Tina Fey, and of course this goes back before that. This is the first cast, the first show. There are several key people, and what's interesting about the release of this film, it was released on the exact anniversary when the show debuted. The show debuted October 11th, 1975. And as of the date of this recording, it is October 12th of 2014. So I guess it's 49 years. I'm sorry, I'm bad with math, okay? 49 years, okay? So, Saturday Night is the film to commemorate what was creative is that they actually released the film on its October the 11th day. So what we have here is what went on behind the scenes. And of course, how iconic was this show of the comedy and the timing of what was going on. So you have the key people like Lorne Michaels. Now there's several people here I have to talk about, and the cast is big, just as the cast was big in the show. So we have key people like Lorne Michaels, played by Gabriel LaBelle. Gabriel LaBelle from The Fabelmans, he plays Lorne Michaels. Rachel Sennott as Rosie Schuster. And she was more behind the scenes, more directing. Corey Michael Smith playing Chevy Chase. Ella Hunt as Gilda Radner. Dylan O'Brien is Dan Aykroyd. Emily Farn as Lorraine Newman. Matt Wood playing John Belushi. I'm sorry if I'm mispronouncing these names because these are kind of new actors to me. Dylan O'Brien, I know who that is. He was in The Maze Runner. Finn Wolfhard's also in the film playing an NBC page. Kim Matula as Jane Curtin. And but there's also several key people. You have J.K. Simmons playing Milton Berle. It's a huge cast with Cooper Hoffman as Dick Ebersol. Yeah, we just Taylor Gray as Al Franken. Nicholas Potamy is Billy Crystal. Also, yeah, and you also have Willem Dafoe playing the head honcho of NBC. So, what's going on here? Well, this is everything leading up to what would be, I'm not going to say it's the greatest television show, but it's one of the longest running TV shows ever. And of course, and this was not the first, it was a landmark in a way, but it was a landmark show in a way because of the time. And of course, this was obviously the generation of the counterculture providing their sense of comedy. And when the show launched, it launched television history. Now, obviously, this was not the first show to do this because in Canada, and also Lorne Michaels was behind that, was Second City, SCTV, and that's where Dan Aykroyd came from that, and Rick Moranis, and all those people. So Saturday Night Live was a derivative, I would say, of, this is my opinion, not necessarily fact, but it was a derivative of what was going on in Canada with Second City, as well as there's a USA division of that in Chicago, so that's where you get Belushi and so forth. But also, I would say it's a derivative of National Lampoon and Second City. Both of those sketch comedy groups that were all about parody and so on and so forth. You know, this was kind of a derivative. Saturday Night Live was kind of a derivative of that. And so what was going on is that there was a ton of chaos. The lighting fixtures never worked. The sound system was terrible. The cast, I mean, literally, Belushi wanted to beat the crap out of people because he's in a bumblebee suit. Yeah, that was one of the first sketches. He didn't want to do that because he thought he was a better actor than that. The musical guest was Billy Preston. The host of the show was George Carlin. He was not pleased to be there. Matter of fact, they show that this was the counterculture and how about all of them were on drugs. Yeah, it's just and this was also where the old guard, the old guys, really clashed with the new kids. Again, this was, like I said, this was the counterculture going on, so you still had the people like Johnny Carson and Milton Berle. And let me tell you, those old guys, Johnny Carson, I myself respect Johnny Carson, what he did for late night television, and I thought he was funny, but that's not my generation. Nor was this my generation. This was my parents' generation, but this was kind of how they were regarded. And I gotta say, they were not painted in the best picture in this film. Milton Berle is a sex fiend constantly hitting on the young ladies, um, doing inappropriate things. I mean, he would be canceled immediately. There would never be a guy like Milton Berle to this day. Um, I mean, he would be gone because you see what he did. Also, Johnny Carson calls Lauren. There's a scene in the film where Johnny Carson calls Lorne Michaels, and Lorne Michaels, he's excited. Hey, it's Johnny Carson. He's going to call me, talk to me, and of course Johnny was out in Burbank, and basically both Milton Berle and Johnny Carson told the cast and everybody behind Saturday Night Live, I hope you fall and fail. Johnny Carson called Lorne Michaels on the telephone and said, I just want to call and wish you good luck. But he was open and what he thought of Lorne Michaels. He said, I think you're a piece of fill in the blank, and I hope and just basically, you're not going to last a week, kid. Of course, this ends up being one of the most longest running TV shows in history. And you have who we look at as comedy icons saying, this show is going to die. Yeah, needless to say, the old guys, they're not painted in the best light here. Even the character that Willem Dafoe plays, the NBC exec, that was the guy who really had the power with his hand to say, we're either going to go live or we're going to play this rerun of Carson. And the reason why Carson was involved, because this was a time when comedy was obviously was big business back in those days. And what had happened was Johnny Carson, and this is how powerful Johnny Carson was. Carson did not have a live show on Saturday night. Instead, he reran an episode from the week. But he had still bought the time. And it was up to the NBC execs but obviously, NBC had the ultimate say and say, no, we're not going to air that, we're going to do this. That's why Carson was so hostile, is because Carson had bought the time. He bought the 11:30 Saturday night. Even though he never he did not have a live show. It was, I bought the time so I can rerun my shows. So, yeah, that's how powerful he was. But NBC had just a bit more power to say, we're going live. And so that's what happened. obviously there's it's obviously what happened because NBC still airs the show. It's debatable whether it's good or not. Obviously they've done something right because the show's still running. But however, if you talk to like past cast members, they, I think some of them are grateful that they went through the time, but a lot of them were glad to get out of it when they left the show, and that's just over time. This isn't the necessarily the original cast, but it shows you know what happened, and I think it was important. I think it was important to tell, important story to tell, and of course the film was directed by Jason Reitman and co-written by Reitman and Gil Keenan. Now, now Jason Reitman is he's the son of Ivan Reitman, and of course they went on. Ivan Reitman and some of the original cast members that was part of National Lampoon and also Second City, and so out of those guys came movies like Animal House, Blues Brothers. Blues Brothers was a SNL sketch before it went to the movies. So yeah, you think of all that group. Like I said, it's kind of a Second City and National Lampoon hodgepodge. What eventually led into becoming Saturday Night Live, and still the longest running TV show, or not, it's one of the longest running TV shows ever. It debuted October 11th, 1975, and here it is October the 12th, 2024. There will be a new episode tonight at 11:30. Check your local listings. So this was I think it was a nice little telling of of a landmark in television history, and how it essentially changed television forever and changed comedy in a lot of ways. You think about this was John Belushi, Dan Aykroyd, and Gilda Radner and Jane Curtin, and several of those key people, and Chevy Chase. Chevy Chase was really the big star of the whole thing, and he was the one that did the Weekend Update. He was the first guy to do the Weekend Update. And you think of all the people that went after that. I mean, right after Chevy Chase left, there was Bill Murray. And then you have also people like Dennis Miller, Norm Macdonald, Colin Quinn, Jimmy Fallon, Tina Fey. Those were the people that lined up right after them to do the Weekend Update on SNL. So this was a good little movie. It is deserving of its R rating because obviously they're going to express what they feel, and there was drugs. Again, 1975. That's when definitely cocaine was hitting. Back in the comedy clubs. So, but it's interesting how it was a show that was a gamble, and nobody really wanted it, but it ends up being one of the longest running TV shows of all time. So that was Saturday night. Stay tuned. maybe this evening I'll have another movie we'll take a look at. But right now I'm in the process still in the process of converting all my movies to digital. That's going to take some time because Blu-rays take forever to rip. I'm telling you, they take forever to rip. I mean, it's basically you're doing it in real time. You know, if you got a 90-minute movie, it's going to take 90 minutes to rip. And I've got some 3-hour titles. So, yeah, but stay tuned. I'll have another movie right after this. Well, howdy, folks. I apologize that this video is coming up just a few weeks late, and of course taking some time. Been really busy doing other things, actually, so haven't had a lot of time devoted to a weekend to watch a lot of movies. So you'll see my review of Saturday Night, which was done in the middle of October, and now here we are in November. Hopefully I'll get back to doing a little bit more of the weekend movies. But tonight we're going to continue on. Hopefully I can deliver a full video of content to you. That's what I'm planning to do. So tonight we're going to take a look at a film from 1979. This is a film I've had in my collection for quite some time. But the past few weeks I've been really sitting down and just kind of watching this movie, and it's kind of grown on me a little bit. This is a movie, it kind of gives a false impression to me. It just the title alone gives off an impression. Is it about jazz singers or but then you see the name Bob Fosse attached to it, you're thinking, oh, it's Broadway, which is a part of it, but it's I've always thought it was kind of this weird movie. I remember seeing this movie back in the early 90s when the channel, the Encore channel, debuted on basic cable. But the sound wasn't turned up very loud, so it was like, because I had family over at the time, it was a long time ago. So I didn't really catch what the whole movie was about, and but what am I talking about? It is from 1979. It is All That Jazz. Because the title alone is kind of... I always kind of misinterpreted this film about jazz just because it says All That Jazz. But as the film goes on, you'll find out that it's a phrase taken from a song in a show called There's No Business Like Show Business. There's a line that says All That Jazz. So tonight we're going to watch All That Jazz. So grab your microwavable popcorn, or however you take it. Grab a soft drink, sit down, and check out your whatever streaming services. Maybe Max, I'm not quite sure what platforms you're on. Maybe Prime Video, maybe. And it's definitely on the Criterion channel if you have that. So punch up All That Jazz from 1979, directed by Bob Fosse, released by 20th Century Fox and Columbia Pictures. So here we go. So that was All That Jazz from 1979, directed by Bob Fosse, starring Roy Scheider as the title character. This film is, I shouldn't say autobiographical, but it is very much it's very much a depiction of Bob Fosse himself. Just maybe a bit exaggerated. Because one of the things that, upon viewing some supplements with this Criterion Blu-ray, is that Fosse was a little obsessed with death ever since he was a small child. And so when he directed this, obviously he made the character played by Jessica Lange to represent death in the film. She's like the angel of death. And so Joe Gideon is a bit of a exaggerated depiction of Fosse. Because Fosse did not die until years later. He did have open heart surgery, but did survive the first time. But however, died years later, like 1987, I believe. And and this came out in '79. So, the fascination of death, and also there was this whole ordeal with him being a bit of a womanizer, and I don't know if Fosse was that way, but obviously there had been failed marriages and relationships and so forth. So, but obviously Joe Gideon is a bit of a womanizer. One of the things that they talk about is how many times he's cheated on his spouses, because also Anne Reinking ends up being Joe's girlfriend, but however, the ex-wife is still in the picture. Who played his ex-wife? So that's the nice thing about Criterion, is that they have a whole list of the cast at the beginning of the booklet here. Leland Palmer. So, yeah, Leland Palmer plays Joe Gideon's wife. And then you have also his daughter, played by Esbrit Foldy. I hope I'm pronouncing her name. It's not a name I'm familiar with, but she plays his daughter, and kind of is a little estranged to her. But again, it's kind of a. Someone said that this was very influenced very much by Fellini. Like if Fellini had told the story of Bob Fosse, this is what it would look like. But there is some true to life things that did happen in this film. Here are the things. Joe Gideon in the film All That Jazz is preparing to go into a production of a Broadway play. Matter of fact, when we see Joe in the first 5 minutes, we see him, who he is physically, and then it goes into the cattle call with the song on Broadway performed by George Benson. and it's shot and edited very much like a documentary style, because you don't all you hear is the song play. You don't hear any dialogue from any characters. It just, you see, a ton of people going back and forth, uh, dancing and doing various stunts and movements, hand movements, and then it does variations of people singing, and but you don't hear any audio from any of the characters or the actors or the performers. It's all, you have the soundtrack recording of Benson's on Broadway play over that song, or play over that sequence. And in real life, Bob Fosse was casting for his production of Chicago. And in the film All That Jazz, the production ends up being called from, I believe it's called From L.A. to, no, From New York to L.A. That's the name of the production. And in real life, Bob Fosse was finishing up post-production on the film Lenny, with Dustin Hoffman. And in this film, you have Joe Gideon in post-production on a film called The Stand-Up, in which the comedian that is featured in the stand-up portions was the actor, I can't think of who it is off the top of my head right now, but the actor that's featured in the stand-up film segments was the person who played Lenny Bruce on stage. So all that was going on in real life, and so you have this kind of just an exaggerated telling of Fosse and what he was going through and who he is as a person. There's a feature on this Criterion Blu-ray with Anne Reinking, who played Fosse's girlfriend. And yes, that is Anne Reinking from the movie Annie. So this came out just prior to, a couple years prior to Annie. So and so Anne Reinking she plays Fosse's girlfriend in the film, and there's a segment on this Criterion Blu-ray with her and Elizabeth Foldy, where they talk about the film, and one of the things she said to Fosse is, "Why don't you make Joe more likable?" Because Bob Fosse was very, very likable. He was very friendly. He was very gentle with the people, and in this film, All That Jazz, Joe Gideon is more of there's a side to him that you don't necessarily like. I mean, everybody has problems. I mean, even myself, I have health problems. I'm not the best person to get along with. I have problems. I try to be the best person that I can be. But the truth of the matter is, I have problems. We all have problems. We all have flaws. We all have things that we deal with. But also, Joe Gideon in here has not only has problems with the people that he's involved with, but also he's addicted to pain pills. He's addicted to cigarettes. He's constant. Every time that you see Roy Scheider in this film, he's got a cigarette hanging out of his mouth, and which that was true of Fosse as well. He was very much a chain smoker, and so yeah. So like I said, the film is very much a depiction of a flawed individual. Now, you can obviously tell that this was a movie to close out the 70s. I don't know if you could actually make this again. I always do this is talk about, of an older film, is talk about could you make this film today. I don't know, possibly, but quite possibly you could probably do this one today. But the thing of it is, the film, it does have a cynical tone to it, because it's very, very cynical movie, but it's done in such a way that it's kind of upbeat, and the whole sequence at the end of Bye Bye Life, which is a take on the Everly Brothers song Bye Bye Love. They just changed the words, from Bye Bye Love to Bye Bye Life. They change it to Bye Bye Love to Bye Bye Life, and then to I Think I'm Gonna Cry to I Think I'm Gonna Die. So that ties into the story of with Joe Gideon, and he actually is in this the final sequence with Ben Vereen showing up as a television not a commentator, but a personality or a host, and ending with that song. It's so it has this upbeat feeling to something that's very, very cynical, is because obviously Joe dies, so he's meeting death, and who is played by Jessica Lange, but her name is what is it, Angelica or Angelina or something with the word angel in it, but she's essentially the angel of death. And that's kind of shoehorned throughout the movie, is that he's sitting in a backstage area, and he keeps talking to this beautiful woman who's in this white gown, and just kind of reflecting on his life and where he admits to her where he messed up, and he goes, "Oh, I did that, and I shouldn't have done it," And this is very much a film of the 70s, but again, I think it quite possibly could be made today if you did it, maybe changed a few things. But it's, how do you, obviously back in May, I myself had a medical procedure done that could have killed me had I not had the procedure done. It was emergency. And yeah, when things like that you do get a little morbid. But I'm not thinking about, I don't have an obsession with death. Joe Gideon does. And so I was just, it made me think, is this it? Is this it? There's so many more things I want to do, and there's so many things it made me think a little bit, like, that's it? 40 years and that's it? It did make me think a little bit, when I had that procedure done, so. But, yeah, you see all strands of show business, and what's interesting is that every time that you see Joe in the mirror, and he always ends with "It's showtime, folks." And in the beginning of the film, he delivers that line the best, and he delivers it the best. And as it goes on, and you see him do that routine again, it gets worse and worse. Where he's like, "Showtime, folks," and he gets either weaker, and or he starts coughing profusively, and yeah, it's just it's definitely one of those movies that gives you an upbeat sense of something that's very, very cynical, and its subject, the subject of death. Okay, like I said, I had seen this film years and years ago, but I was too young to fully understand what the film was about. Matter of fact, there's some scenes in this movie that are not very kid friendly. I mean, the film is rated R, and the language and the the nudity and so on and so forth. Um, but that's this again. The title always kind of threw me off. All that jazz, was this about jazz dancing? And yes and no. But now that I'm an adult, I see where that title came from. It came from a line that's in the song and the program. There's no business like show business. So where there's a line that Ethel Merman says, starts listing all these advantage, or these things that come with show business, and she goes, and all that jazz. So that's where it comes from. But that's about all I got to say about it. I mean, there are two favorite sequences that I know I have of this movie, and they are because the movie is a musical. Especially when you get towards the end, where Joe's life is starting to come to an end, and he's starting to hallucinate quite a bit, and envisioning his wife, his girlfriend, and his daughter in this, the whole thing, like, with the daughter singing "You're Gonna Miss Me, Daddy," and stuff like that. But that's not one of my favorite sequences. My first favorite sequence is the opening number at the beginning with the cattle call and the George Benson on Broadway, because it it definitely shows, and this is true to life, what every time that there's a Broadway production that goes on, they have technically what's called cattle calls. Sorry, my Blu-ray player just shut off, but so that's why the lighting changed. They have these big, massive cattle calls in which the director will just kind of watch how people dance and how they move, and just their body language is, and then it goes into can they sing? Can they perform this movement? Can they do this? Can they do that? And how you how the director will go through and say, I like this person, this person, this person, and goes on and selects until he gets down to, out of thousands of people, will select people to get down to like the final 10 that he needs to fill the cast. And then my second favorite sequence is the sequence called I'm just going to call it Everything Old is New Again. And it's a scene in which Anne Reinking and Elizabeth Foldy do this little dance number in front of Joe, which is basically the girlfriend and his daughter. They do this little musical number where they just they had the song selected and they drop a needle on the record and they do this little number, and it's, I don't know, there's something about it that's one of my favorite sequences in this film. It's just because I know if I had a family, I would enjoy. I do have a family, so don't panic. I mean, if I had, you know, a wife and a daughter, or girlfriend and daughter, they did something like that, I would be tickled pink to have them do that with me, you know, right in front of me. So, so that's where I'm getting the enjoyment that Joe would get when I see that sequence, because it's just them putting on a show for someone who they love, you know, no more, no less. So that was tonight's film, All That Jazz, from 1979. It is available on the Criterion Collection, which I do encourage you to get if you want to check the movie out. Where it's available digitally, I am not entirely sure. Being that this is on the Criterion Collection, it's probably on the Criterion channel. It's also probably available on, I don't know, Check Max, I'm not entirely sure, or Amazon Prime, you know. But yeah, All That Jazz. So stay tuned for the next movie. Okay, for the final film that I've selected for this particular video, this one is a Disney Plus original, and it is a documentary. They've been, you know, this film, and a year ago they did a docu-series. It's from the same people, which is Ron Howard and Brian Grazer, but this time they collaborated with Steven Spielberg's Amblin Entertainment and Steven Spielberg himself to do a documentary, not docu-series, because last year they did a docu-series on Industrial Light and Magic, just called Light and Magic. But this time they returned to do a documentary film that runs 1 hour and 45 minutes, all on John Williams. And it's just pure and simply called Music by John Williams. The film is directed by Laurent Bouzereau. So this I've already seen, so I'm going to pause right here, let you check out this documentary. Do fire up your Disney Plus, because that's the only place you're going to be able to view the film. And yeah, just check it out. Okay, so that was the Disney Plus documentary from Steven Spielberg, Amblin Entertainment, Ron Howard and Brian Grazer, Imagine Entertainment, all about John Williams, music by John Williams. Directed by Laurent Bouzereau. If you don't know who Laurent Bouzereau is, Laurent Bouzereau was the gentleman that back in the 90s and early 2000s, or clear through the 2000s, would direct a lot of the behind-the-scenes features and featurettes that were put onto VHS, Laserdisc, and DVD. And he he specifically did a lot of Spielberg's movies, and like pretty much any of the big like documentaries that that's, let's say, Spielberg would do about behind the scenes. Like he did the behind the scenes of Jaws, Close Encounters, E.T., as well as Back to the Future, and gosh, there's so many. Just that name popped up so many times amongst the behind the scenes making of featurettes and features. Some of those back in the early days were feature length, but that was those movies. This was all about John Williams, and this was quite interesting. And it's one of those things where you find out, oh my gosh, I had no idea that he did this. And very early, the film goes into his history, where he came from, where he grew up, and how his mother was an actress and dancer. His father was a musician and did session work for films, and just how that was what kind of planted seeds into his what planted the seeds of him wanting to become a musician himself, and how he served in the military, how he was in the Air Force, and he played in the Air Force bands, and then leading to playing as a musician on film scores. Like, I had no idea that he was the one playing the piano in the film To Kill a Mockingbird, which I also love Elmer Bernstein as a composer, but he was the one that did that opening. That was John Williams playing the piano in that opening scene. So I thought, wow, that was John Williams playing the piano to an Elmer Bernstein score. But anyway, that was him. And then that eventually led into being assigned to do like spec musicianship for TV shows and movies. Like they would have the main composer do the music, but they would need some like incidental music to fill in. And then it led to him just adapting someone else's work, such as Fiddler on the Roof. And then you go into the 70s, and then the rest is history, So, and the film doesn't stray away from, again, this is about a man. The same with Light and Magic. It goes into the personal story side of the people that worked on those movies. So how does, it goes into the death of, talks about the death of his wife, and how there needed, how he needed time to grieve before he could ever think about stepping back up on a podium and wave a baton. And it goes personal, but the thing is, there's you always felt like, but the whole time watching it, when they get personal, it seems like the glass is not entirely full, to me, at least. But then it goes on to explain he's a very shy man. How he's very shy, and it's to get something like that out of him is a bit much, and they love him enough to respect him enough not to go that far. But like one of the stories is about why he resigned from the Boston Pops, and how film music and classical music at the time were revered as, how film music was kind of revered as something that was very lowbrow amongst classical musicians. And there was this, when he would go to perform or conduct the Boston Pops, there would be this kind of attitude towards him that he just said, I'm not going to tolerate this. And so, if that's what you want to do, I'm out. Enough said. Now, eventually he did come back and they issued an apology to him, and he conducted the Boston Pops for longest time. And matter of fact, some of his film scores were written while he was in Boston. Like I believe Schindler's List was amongst. Schindler's List was amongst some of his works there. But the man is a legend, and to still be conducting music in his 90s and still be sharp as a whip to come up with music. And of course, but what was interesting, he goes, I don't like to do sequels. That was what was interesting. He said I hate doing sequels. But this is a man who had done several sagas of music. He did do Jaws 2, but he didn't do anything after that. He did, of course, the first 2 Jurassic Park movies. He's done all the Indiana Jones movies. All of Star Wars except for the spin-off movies, like the Star Wars story. That's someone else. That was what was interesting, is that he said, I don't like to do sequels, but then explain Indiana Jones and Star Wars. But he has done several sequels. But he said there's a reason behind those, because he said I felt that I couldn't let those go. Those were like children of mine. But yeah, that's music by John Williams. It was quite an interesting documentary about the man, how he created such memorable music. And to think about this, as a conductor of film scores, think about how many platinum selling film composers are there. Not a whole lot. There's not a whole lot of platinum selling film composers. I mean, Star Wars, the original Star Wars soundtrack. I forget how many millions of copies that sold back in 1977. So, I myself have a collection of John Williams music. Now, I didn't get this. I also have a few more on CD, but these are my vinyls that I have of John Williams scores. So right off the bat, we have here from 1975, the movie that kind of overwhelmed Steven Spielberg of how simple the score was to create, Jaws. Now it was how Spielberg went, that's it, with just 2 notes on the piano. So yeah, there's Jaws. from 1982, which he won the Academy Award for Best Music Score. E.T. the Extraterrestrial, the original. Now, of course, this is not exactly. I have several versions of the E.T. soundtrack. I have a couple CD soundtracks as well. But the interesting thing was for the vinyl release, it's basically a alternate take of what was used in the score. It was like, okay, we recorded the music for the score, but we need to record the music for the album. So yeah. So if you listen to this and listen to the movie, the score may not match up exactly, but that's okay. When you're listening to the vinyl, you're listening to vinyl. Another one is Close Encounters of the Third Kind. And of course, this one's kind of cool. It's got a nice gatefold. And of course, I just a few videos ago explained the flaw with this scene, but that's okay. Matter of fact, they stop it just before you see the flaw. But yeah, which is an iconic shot of the movie. Let me get it back into its sleeve here because I keep my vinyl records in these plastic sleeves to help protect them. And then we have the following year, from 1978, we have Superman the movie, another iconic score from John Williams. This time he was working with Richard Donner, and because this is a 2-record set, we also get a nice gatefold there with Christopher Reeve flying as Superman. So again, got to put it back in the plastic. Then from 1981 we have Raiders of the Lost Ark. This was a Columbia Records release, but the movie was from Paramount. And this does not have a gatefold, so it's just, yeah. And last but not least, unfortunately, out of all the Star Wars movies I have on vinyl, it is The Force Awakens, and it's this picture disc. So we got Kylo Ren there, we got Rey, and then Han Solo, and yeah. These are picture discs from Walt Disney Records. Now, I also have on CD, I don't have them here with me, I have 2 CD versions of E.T. I have the 20th anniversary version, and I have the 40th anniversary edition from La La Land Records, as well as I have CD versions of Close Encounters, the original Star Wars A New Hope, and I'm thinking I have Episode 1 of Star Wars. I also have Saving Private Ryan. Yeah, just a boatload of goodies there from John Williams. And of course, the man's still making music clear up into his 90s. He was talking about retirement, and he said that Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny was going to be his last film, but then later pulled back on that and said, I'm not retiring. So I think the only thing that will cause John Williams to retire is him passing away, which hopefully is not for a while, but because the man is just he's a genius at what he does, and just how he spots music. He knows how to make a movie come alive. And one of the things when he said with one of the things that they said with the movie Jaws in particular is that you take this soundtrack off and just watch the movie with the dialogue and the sound effects, you take away half the movie. They said literally you take away half the movie if without John Williams' score to that movie because the stupid shark never worked. So there had to be ways to give the audience the illusion that the shark was there without using the mechanical shark. So how do you do that? Well, you shoot an entirely made-up scene with barrels being pulled, and you create sounds in post, which John Williams proudly did that with the score, as well as the rest of the movie made it a kind of a pirate adventure. So that was music by John Williams, and I think it's a really well done documentary. And of course, what was strange is that a little strange about this documentary was Ron Howard was involved, and as far as I know, he only did the score for one movie with Ron Howard. And I believe or he's done two movies. He's only done Far and Away, which came out in 1992, 91, 92. And I believe Solo, a Star Wars story. I believe. And those were the only two Ron Howard movies, but also, what was also, because Ron Howard was behind the docuseries Light and Magic, and Ron Howard hasn't used Industrial Light and Magic since the 80s. Solo was his first movie that he had done with Industrial Light and Magic in well over 30 years. So, yeah, after he had made Backdraft in 1991, which was the last movie that he made with Industrial Light and Magic, he then goes off and he makes Far and Away, which didn't have that big of visual effects in it, and then he makes Apollo 13, which he uses Digital Domain, and was using Digital Domain clear up until present day. So, but apparently, that's a career move. You find the little things like that just funny and ironic, but that's not that was a career move. And well, even Spielberg in recent years has not used John Williams. The last movie that he made with John Williams was Meet the Fabelmans, and there was a period where he did not use John Williams for any of the music score. He used Alan Silvestri for Ready Player One, and he used, was it David Newman or Thomas Newman? He used one of the Newman guys for West Side Story. I believe it was David Newman to recreate West Side Story, which also John Williams performed on. He performed on the original West Side Story, but also that was around the time John Williams was having some health issues with his heart, and so Spielberg considers Williams a friend enough to say, you know what, it's, you know what, John, take a break. You know, just rest. I'll use somebody else to score these movies. So, but then again, I can't imagine Ready Player One with a John Williams score. Possibly other people could, but that's the way it is. I mean, it's it was quite insightful of like, well, he played on this, this, and this before he ever got to compose his own music. It's like you understand that people come from, like they have to work their way up eventually, but it's like, really, he played this. But also, John Williams also really wanted to be a jazz. He was big into jazz back in the 50s and 60s, and I think he even composed some of his his own jazz music on albums, rather than TV shows. But if you want to hear John Williams' best example of doing jazz, listen to the score for Catch Me If You Can. That was more of his modern take on jazz, was the score that he provided for Spielberg's Catch Me If You Can. That da 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 da. That was him doing jazz, because he thought that movie lent itself to a jazz score. So that concludes this weekend of Kdog's Weekend Movies. So coming up, not sure what we got going on, but next week I will plan to be on vacation and taking some time off throughout. Now I'll go back to work this following week, but I'm talking next weekend. You may see more than just some weekend movies, so it'll probably be some movies throughout the week. So, and it'll probably be a marathon of movies. So from me to you, see you later.